Part 2 of Episode 3, Six Sigma. We're back with Part 2 of our overview of Six Sigma. This is the third episode of our 4-episode series about Lean, Six Sigma, and Agile. Check out the previous episodes if you haven't already. In Part 1, we covered the basic structure of Six Sigma and the team makeup. Then we talked about the define phase and some useful tools that help teams stay on track throughout the project. In Part 2, we will cover the remaining 4 phases. But first, let me reiterate that this is just a brief explanation of what the phases are and what they accomplish, and some of the documents the team uses. We will cover these topics in more detail in future episodes. Now, let's get back to the program. So let's assume the project champion is happy with your progress in the define phase and you make it through your tollgate meeting. Now you must turn to the work of the measure phase. During this phase, the team will collect data on the process to understand the problem in a quantitative way. But before they do anything, they must understand some basic rules about statistics so they treat the data correctly. Then they must create intricate process maps that follow the people, process, and technology through the company. They must understand what is happening before they can measure the activities. Once they have their maps drawn, they will be able to create a plan to collect the data. So, what are the basic rules of statistics that the team needs to learn? Understanding how different data types are analyzed will help with the data collection. All levels of measurement are not the same. Imagine you own a chain of bakeries and you want to improve sales. You start by collecting data about your business. The list of locations, the number of customers you see every day, the types of pastries you sell, the amount of butter you use in your recipe, the temperature of the ovens, information like that. Well, you can't treat all the information the same way. For example, if you rank your pastries by sales, the name of the item is a form of nominal data, and we use ordinal data to put them in first, second, or third place. Nominal data can also be subjective opinions, as when a customer complains that your croissants are not flaky enough. Often, to quantify opinions, businesses use a Likert scale from 1 to 10 to gauge customer satisfaction. This is a type of interval data, like temperature. But even though they are represented as numbers, interval data can be misleading when analysts use basic mathematical formulas. For example, if you want to reduce by half the time it takes to bake a croissant, you can't just double the oven temperature. An 800-degree oven is not twice as hot as a 400-degree oven. The temperatures represent intervals on a scale, not real numbers. And when you are ranking your sales, the difference between the first and second place pastries may not be the same difference between second and third place. Nominal, ordinal, and interval data are useful, but to perform most calculations, you need to collect ratio data like time, size, and weight. These measurements are real numbers and are used to calculate averages, variances, and other important metrics. It takes some time, but the team needs to understand the rules that apply to different types of measurements. Now, when it comes to data collection, the more samples the better, but costs must be considered. Confidence in the test increases with the sample size, but we must balance our need for certainty with the cost of the collection. Imagine you make 200 croissants a day, but you choose to examine only 5 of them. A sample this small will mislead you because by accident you may get 5 very bad or 5 very good croissants. But if you examine all 200, then you lose all that revenue for the day. A popular saying concerning data is garbage in, garbage out. It should go without saying, but if the data is not collected accurately, your decisions will be based on data that is just wrong. Descriptive statistics are population or historical data that we use as a baseline for our current state. When we are testing solutions in the improve phase, we will compare our baseline with the performance after the solution has been implemented. We want to see if the solution provides a benefit or if the previous process was better. So the baseline must be as accurate as possible. The value of inferential statistics is linked to sample size. When dealing with samples, we often make inferences when we compare them to our baseline. If your team does not understand the differences between these types of statistics, you will have problems when you perform tests later in the project. We will briefly talk about the importance of hypothesis testing later. One rule of thumb is to always graph the data. Many types of analysis are better understood when they are represented graphically. I'm sure there are some people who can look at a table of numbers and understand what they mean, but for the rest of us, it is best to graph the data. Find the best graph that represents the data and stick with it throughout the project. This is also a necessity for any briefings with leadership. If you only have a few minutes with a busy executive, graphs are the best way to show what is happening. As we saw in Lean, process maps can capture the actions of different departments, data about their performance, and follow value as it flows through an organization. A critical step in the measure phase is to map and measure the current state, as there may be significant disconnect between what we think happens and what actually happens. Other maps, like this swim lane map, capture the handoffs as the product moves through a process. You can add colors to represent if the process step is value added, green, non-value added, red, or business value, yellow. Business value represents activities that are not valued by the customer but must be performed due to regulations or limits of technology. On the left side of the slide, the top map was created from standard operating procedures documents and represents how the process should work. However, the lower map was created after a Gemba walk, and some team members followed how the process actually works. You can see from the bottom map that the Gemba walk revealed 3 non-value added process steps that aren't in the standard operating procedures. Gemba walks are so valuable because they show the hidden factory, the extra work performed that is hidden from management and secretly costs the company time, money, and customers. The data collection plan is a shared document that is used to guide the team through the measure phase. It lists all the process steps that will be investigated, how the step is defined and scoped, the sample size of the collection, who will take the measurements, how the data will be documented, and the tools they will use, just about everything. Nothing should be left to chance. There must be significant detail in the plan and training given to the team because much of the data collection will be unsupervised at times and in places that are inaccessible for the entire team. It is also important that the observer collect all the other environmental data that is available for future reference. Uncontrollable variables like humidity can impact the product, and so the data should be captured if possible. In our croissant example from earlier, the source of the problem may be that the humidity at one location is too high. If the team does not think of capturing the humidity data, the team may never know what the cause of the problem really is. It may even change the outcome of your project. Eventually, the team proves that they have completed the objective of the measure phase. They have verified the baseline data that quantifies the problem, and they are allowed to move on to the analyze phase. The purpose of the analyze phase is to discover what causes the problem. This is when the team uses the data they collected during the measure phase to perform root cause analysis. We know that variation is the main cause of defects. Variation is calculated by measuring the difference between individual samples and the average of all the samples. No matter how consistent your processes are, if you use precise measurement instruments, you can always find variation in the units you produce. The more inconsistency you have in your processes, the more variation you will see in your product. So teams track process and product variation, hoping it will lead them to the source of the problem. One way to track it is to use multivariate studies to map the variation with highly detailed graphs. Then the team can compare data from many dimensions to see where and when it occurs. For example, it may exist between units, as in from one unit to the next, one croissant is burned while the other is perfect. Or you may find variation inside each unit, as when you see that your croissants are burned only on one side. We also see variation change over time, as ovens lose their precision or experienced bakers are replaced by new employees. Multivariate graphs are quite complicated, so we will cover them in more detail in future episodes. Pareto charts are also useful during the analyze phase. They use the 80-20 principle to help prioritize which things get investigated. For example, they may show that 80% of your burned pastries are baked by 20% of your bakeries. This helps the team focus on the ovens in those locations. But even though they guide the team in the right direction, they don't provide the information that the team needs to find the root cause. For that, we use cause and effect diagrams, regression analysis, and hypothesis testing. Here are the two most popular cause and effect tools, the fishbone diagram and the 5 whys diagram. The fishbone diagram is filled in during brainstorming sessions, when the team reviews all their data and comes up with ideas for potential root causes. Then, they plot them on the chart under 6 categories: management, method, measure, materials, manpower, and Mother Nature. For example, under manpower, the company may find the primary cause of some problems is that their workers are not properly trained, while a secondary cause is that the turnover is high. Turnover is when workers leave the company and the replacements need to be hired. If turnover is high, it means that the company is spending a lot of time training new employees who are leaving without gaining enough experience to become effective workers. The 5 whys diagram takes this information and focuses on the root cause by asking the question why 5 times. Why is turnover high? Because workers are unsatisfied. Why are they unsatisfied? Because they dislike their managers. Why do they dislike their managers? And so on. Eventually you will come to a cause that you can identify to solve. But Tom, you ask, aren't the fishbone diagram and 5 whys a part of Lean? Doesn't Six Sigma have its own tools? Isn't there any statistical analysis we can perform to identify cause and effect? Yes, there are different analyses we will use to test our assumptions before we make any decisions. There are too many tests to cover, but we will talk a little about regression analysis and hypothesis testing. regression analysis tests whether an input variable, like butter, has an influence on an output variable, like customer satisfaction. The test calculates the influence and provides a formula that can be used as a predictive model. Therefore, if the input variable greatly influences the output, if the relationship is strong, then you will be able to accurately predict the outcome when the input changes. This is best explained with an example. To continue with our croissant project, we ran a test to see if the amount of butter in the recipe had an impact on the customer satisfaction score. We made batches of pastries, each with a different amount of butter, gave them to customers, and asked them to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. So for each batch, we have an average satisfaction score. We use this data for our test. After the test, we use the formula to calculate what the regression would have predicted for each data point. At 110 grams, the customers gave the croissant an average score of 6.7. Those scores are represented by the blue line. But when we use the regression formula, it gives us a score of about 7.3. These scores are represented by the orange line. What we want is a regression line that closely resembles our actual data because we want to be able to accurately predict an outcome, customer score, if we are given an input, butter amount. Remember, we are trying to show that there is a relationship between these two variables. But we see throughout the graph, the regression formula does not do a very good job of prediction, even though we suspect that there is a relationship. This is because one limitation to a regression analysis is that the relationship between the input and the output must be linear. For example, every additional gram of butter should increase my customer score. But if we look at the graph closely, we see that the relationship butter has with customer satisfaction is curvilinear. It is curved, not straight. It doesn't follow a straight line because the score seems to peak around 124 grams of butter per batch, and then the scores decrease as too much butter is added. We can see from these graphs that if we perform two tests, one for the scores before 124 grams and one for the scores after, we can fit two formulas that offer good predictability. Now, two models fit very well where one model failed. The amount of butter is truly related to the customer's scores, just not in a linear way through all possible inputs. For the project's purposes, the right amount seems to be between 124 and 128 grams. We use hypothesis testing to see if the data proves if the impact of the variable is statistically significant or merely coincidence. We are asking the question, is it probable that these data sets are actually the same even though they appear different? If the p-value of the test is low, we reject the hypothesis that they are the same. For example, let's say the company has 3 bakeries and recently opened a 4th. We think that part of our problem may have something to do with the old equipment and baking process in our older bakeries. So we run a hypothesis test to see if they score as well as the one we opened just 6 months ago. We take the average weekly score that we received from sites 1, 2, and 3 and compare it with 6 months of weekly data from site 4. Note that there are more scores from sites 1, 2, and 3 because they have been collecting data from those bakeries for longer. The hypothesis we are testing, or null hypothesis, is that there is no difference between the average scores. The alternative hypothesis is that they are different. We perform a t-test and compare the data. The averages of 7.22 and 7.66 are similar, but the test's p-value of 0.00, highlighted in yellow at the bottom of the table, tells us there is very little chance the average scores are the same. The scores from Site 4 are higher. If there was suspicion that Site 4 was a problem, this test proves otherwise. I know this seems like a lot, but we haven't even scratched the surface. There will be many more episodes on hypothesis testing in the future. This level of probability and statistics is difficult for many to understand, and is why so many organizations prefer Lean to Six Sigma. Once we prove we have identified and validated the root causes of the problem, we can move forward to the improve phase. From our work in the analyze phase, we have a list of variables that we know contribute the most to our outcome. Now, the purpose of the improve phase is to generate, test, and implement solutions that address root causes. Our first task is to brainstorm and prioritize ideas to test during our experiments. This includes risk and cost-benefit analyses that help us avoid creating solutions that are dangerous or too expensive. Then we must design experiments where we test our assumptions, run some pilots, and try to optimize those variables for the highest level of quality. And after we have identified proven solutions that eliminate root causes and improve performance metrics, we move to implementation. During brainstorming sessions, the team considers all the work that has been completed to this point and creates a plan to solve the problem at the root cause. These meetings should be organized where ideas are openly shared, data is reviewed, and approval from the champion is sought. Subject matter experts and all team members should be welcome to attend. In addition to brainstorming, the team may use the theory of inventive problem solving, or TIPS model, for generating solutions. The format is to take your specific problem and then transform it into a generic problem. Then find a generic solution to solve the generic problem, and finally, a specific solution for your project's problem. The theory behind TIPS is that all types of problems have been solved by someone somewhere in the world. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, just steal their idea. Now that solutions have been identified, it is time to test them. We use experiments to tell us if a new solution makes a significant impact toward fixing our problem, or if our current method can be improved in some way. A designed experiment saves the company time by ensuring that each level of each variable is assigned to a run, that the results are properly measured, and that the best solution is identified. So, imagine there is a baking competition in a month, and we want to enter our croissant. We want to determine the best possible texture for our pastries. We can adjust the fat content of the butter, the time it spends in the oven, and the temperature of the oven. Fat content, time, and temperature are the factors or independent variables. A run is the experiment with the factors set at a precise level. The three factors each have 2 levels, giving us 8 runs for a full factorial experiment. Each run is replicated 5 times, which means we use this particular recipe to make 5 batches of croissant. Then we offer them to customers and ask them to rate them. The result in the columns is the average score given by testers on a scale of 1 to 10. For example, the second batch of croissant that uses the recipe from run 4 was given an average score of 8. In order to see which recipe works best, we create a main effects chart. A quick view of the main effects charts show that there is a difference between the average scores for butter, time, and temperature factors. The croissant made with butter with 80% fat received higher scores on average, as did croissant that baked for 18 minutes at 190 degrees. We will discuss how to calculate the interactions between these factors and levels in future episodes, but this lets us know that we are investigating the right things. With these experiments, we have implemented proven solutions that eliminate the root causes and improve performance metrics, so we can move on to the control phase. Now that we have created and implemented our solution, during the control phase, we ensure that the gains we achieved are maintained over time. We create a control plan that defines how the new process will be monitored and controlled. This will include a risk analysis and response plan to predict possible problems and minimize their impact. Reinforcing proper procedures is mandatory for success. Understanding change management strategies is essential as we develop and deploy new training and update materials for all employees. A large part of these efforts will be to use formal documents to standardize how we will work in the future. Now let's look at process monitoring and standard operating procedures. Statistical process control is the use of statistical analysis and graphics to monitor and understand the variation in process performance. The goal is to create control charts that quickly show if the process is still performing as expected or if it has regressed. Control limits are calculated and drawn on the chart. As we monitor our performance, all the units we measure should remain between these limits. However, if we measure a unit and the measurement is above or below our limits, this means it is possible that the process has reverted to its previous performance. For example, if we increase the size of our croissant and set the control limits between 15 and 16 centimeters, we will know there is a problem if we start to see some measuring below 15 centimeters. Control plans are generated during the control phase to provide instructions on how to properly monitor new processes and respond to poor performance. In the plan on this slide, the Y metric is the outcome measurement, the size of our croissant from the previous example. The X metrics might be the temperature of the oven or the amount of flour being used. The unit of measurement will be centimeters. The target will be 15.5 with the control limits between 15 and 16. The process owner will be the head baker. The system they use will be the bakery and its equipment, and what to check will be the length from end to end. And as an overall change management plan, new SOPs need to be written to outline the process steps in detail in accordance with business policies. These files are the ideal form of documentation to ensure sustainability of improvements. The process owner and process SMEs should help author the SOPs, while the entire team should validate them. Care should be given to write them in the language most easily understood by the user, with graphics and visual cues to make comprehension immediate. The team should incorporate them into all training programs, and they should be made available in all the applicable workstations and in the PMO library. Previous editions need to be destroyed to reduce confusion. Once the team has created a stable, sustainable process and put controls in place to prevent regression, the project can be closed and everything handed over to the process owner. To formalize the end of the project, after the control tollgate meeting, the team should meet with the process owner and workers to hand over responsibility for the change and the solution. This will ensure that any questions about the new process are answered and the team members can return to their jobs without any worry. The team should also celebrate with the party, and leadership should publish the project's results throughout the company. This will help promote and raise awareness of the benefits of Six Sigma projects and reward the team for their efforts. Well, that brings this episode to an end, thank God. You made it all the way through another episode. Congratulations. That might be some kind of record or something. You deserve a badge. And guess what? We have more episodes coming up. So check back next week for the overview of Six Sigma and then Agile the week after. Those are going to be so much fun. Again, here is our contact information. You can find us at leanenglishconsulting.com and send us an email at info@leanenglishconsulting.com. I would love to hear from you. As I mentioned earlier, there is a PowerPoint presentation and transcript of this episode on our site and on the Lean English Podcast YouTube channel. So check those out as well. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe if you feel like doing me a favor. I mean, I saw that some people watched the last video but didn't hit like. What is going on with them? Come on. Well, that's it for today. Until next time, be good, and I'll talk to you later. And just as Six Sigma projects must come to an end, so too must this episode. I know it's a sad time for everyone, but we must be strong. There will be another episode soon covering the basics of Agile, so you have that to look forward to. If you have reached the end of this episode without falling asleep or jumping off a cliff, your reward for valor will arrive in the mail in 6 to 8 weeks. As always, for a written transcript of the podcast, please visit my website at leanenglishconsulting.com. And while you are there, please let me know what you think of the episode and tell me if there is a specific topic you would like me to cover. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. Until next time, be good, and I'll talk to you later.